Friends, guess what? I have another book for you. Today's book is all about wiggling worms at work. Wiggling worms at work? Did you think that worms were working when they're crawling around in the dirt or crawling across the ground? Let's find out what this is all about. This book is by Wendy Pfeffer and it's illustrated by Steve Jenkins. See the worm crawling, and here comes another one. Yeah, worms. Down in the ground under your feet, thousands of worms wiggle around flower bulbs and tunnel under trees. They twist and turn, eating almost anything in their way. Look at all those tunnels they're creating. That's interesting. Farmers plow their fields to loosen the soil. Crumbly soil lets the roots of the plants spread out and grow. Worms also loosen the soil as they wiggle along. They are called nature's plows. As worms twist and turn, they push aside loose soil. This creates tunnels. Air flows along these tunnels and rainwater trickles down through those tunnels. Roots drink it up. Moist ground helps plants grow better. This is what a plow looks like, and there's nature's plow, right? Worms tunnel in hard-packed soil by swallowing it. The soil goes in the worm's mouth, then it slides into the crop and then passes down the gizzard. Oh my, where's it coming out? Any ideas? Worms do not have teeth. Muscles, fine grains of sand, and small stones in the gizzard grind the soil. Worms digest leaf and plant bits that are found in the soil, just as you digest a salad. What's left passes through the worm's body and comes out its tail end in the form of pellets called worm castings. It's like their poop. These castings make good plant food. They help fruits and vegetables grow bigger and better. See that? There it is. Those are the castings, or the poop. You can call it poop. That's what it is. Sometimes worms crawl above the ground. When they tunnel back down into the ground, they pull dead leaves and plants down with them. These plants make the soil better as they rot. Seeds come down too, and some of these seeds send out roots. Seedlings sprout, and worms help new plants begin to grow. Wow, worms do all those jobs. They make the soil more rich and better, more nutritious, and sometimes they help seedlings start to grow. Worms can wiggle, twist, turn, and even tie themselves into knots because they have no backbones. Their soft bodies are made up of rings or segments. These segments act like coils on a slinky toy. They let the worm bend. A worm has no legs, but 8 bristles under each segment act as a little like legs. See, up close, you can kind of see how there's like these little tiny, they're almost microscopic bristles. Strong muscles allow the worm to stretch out its front end and it becomes long and thin, and then the worm fastens its front bristles to the soil, and then the back end slinks up to make the worm grow shorter and fatter and shorter and fat and then longer and leaner, and that's how it wiggles and moves. The worm wiggles along, stretching and slinking, with all its wiggling and twisting and turning. It's a wonder a worm knows where it's headed. It has no eyes, no nose, and no ears, and hardly any brain at all. But a worm knows what's happening nearby. It feels vibrations on the ground and senses a hungry robin. Quickly, the worm slips back into its burrow. Hiding is the only way it can protect itself from its enemies, the robin. Worms also hide from the sun. They must live in damp soil. Since they breathe air through their moist skin, in the hot sun, their skin dries up. They can't breathe, so their skin has to stay moist. Sometimes worms crawl to the surface to find food. They select dead and decaying plants to drag back to their burrows. These plants contain bacteria that the worms eat. Healthy plants do not. Worms pick leaves with pointed ends rather than round ones. No one knows why. Worms also eat fungi and mold. They slurp the hair-like strands of mold the same way you might slurp a strand of spaghetti. Interesting. Worms eat at the entrance of their burrows. Then each worm covers any leftover plants with its castings. What were castings again? Do you remember? It's the poop, right? So when you see those little piles in the grass or on the ground, that's poop from that worm that just crawled under. And they cover up their hole with it when they go down into the ground. This pile of worm castings is called midden. So those castings, that little pile is called midden. It hides the top of the worm's burrow and acts like a door to keep the bad weather and the rain out. Interesting. Yeah, we've seen that before outside. If you're looking around, you'll see those little fresh dirt piles. Sometimes people think they're from ants. They're not. They're actually from worms. Interesting. And it's called midden. In spring, before the weather warms, worms wiggle to the surface to mate. Worms are different from most other animals. Each worm is both male and female, but each one still needs a mate. After mating, each worm crawls back into its burrow. When the weather cools, a ring-like cocoon forms near the head of each worm that has mated. Slowly, the worm begins to move backward. The cocoon inches forward on the worm's body, just as a ring on your finger would move. The cocoon passes over openings in the worm's body. Up to 30 eggs slip out of the opening of the cocoon into the cocoon. See? In a few minutes, the cocoon slips off the worm's head, just as the ring would slip off your finger. The ends of the cocoon close inside the cocoon. Inside the cocoon, the eggs are fertilized. That means baby worms start growing. In about 3 weeks, the eggs hatch. Out of about 30 eggs, only 3 or 4 wormlets emerge from each cocoon. They look like tiny pieces of cotton thread. That's very tiny, like a string from your shirt. Have you ever had a string from your shirt or your sock that you can pull that's really skinny? That's how tiny the baby worm is. The wormlet. They look, and they're less than an inch long. So they're really short too. But they are fully developed worms and live completely on their own. They do not need their parents' help. The wormlets inch along, finding bits of dead plants to eat, dragging them to their tunnels, and covering any leftovers with their castings. They wiggle underground, loosening the soil and making tunnels. Even tiny wormlets help the soil. So even the babies have a job of loosening the soil like a plow. These babies grow fast. In 6 weeks, they're adult worms. That's very fast. In winter, the soil near the surface freezes. The worms plug up their tunnels and move down to warmer soil. They stay there until spring. Then they wiggle up, tunneling, twisting, and turning until they're right under your feet. Can you believe that? They dig so deep under there. Vegetables and flowers grow better. Trees grow bigger. Grass grows greener because there are thousands of wiggling worms at work. Look at those worms. The end. Wow, this book was packed full of new information, wasn't it? Yeah. What was something you learned about worms that you didn't know before? Can you think of anything? Do worms have legs? No. We kind of knew that, but what do they have that helps them move? Do you remember what that's called? Those hairs? Yeah. What about, can worms be out in the sunshine? No, their skin has to stay moist, right? So that's why they go back in the ground pretty quickly after they come up out of the ground. What are those little piles? Remember those little dirt piles outside we see? Yeah, it's worm poop, right? And that's the mitting. Yeah, we learned lots of new things about worms today. I want you to blow someone's mind and share one fact that you learned about worms from this book. Blow their mind, okay? Do you give this book 1 thumb up or 2 thumbs up? You get to decide, and I'll see you next time, friends. Bye-bye.